how can Nintendo spend the past year giving us almost no information about anything, pushing back games we love and expect, and then shadow drop a remaster of one title, Metroid Prime, and then release leaked, rumored, whatever you want to call it, Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games on the system, and now everyone's in love with them again. In order for me to tell you how that works, I'm gonna have to take you back to 1993, 94. You see, in 93 and 94, around that time, my pops and I, we had a Game Boy. And I say we because we shared a Game Boy. I did not have my own. We did not really have that much money. My family was, I mean, not poor, but we didn't have the money to purchase multiple gaming systems. And so my dad had a Game Boy. How he got it, I'm not sure. He was working as a freelance graphic designer, doing work for Nintendo, creating their in-house newsletter. And so he might have had friends over there that were able to get him a Game Boy, whatever it may be. Well, on that very Game Boy, there were two games that we had. Those games were, one, Tetris. I believe Tetris shipped with the Game Boy. So if you had one, you pretty much already had Tetris, and that was not a game that I found to be that interesting. At the age of 4 or 5, it just was too difficult, it required too much thinking, and it just really wasn't my cup of coffee. But the game that I fell in love with, my very first game, was Super Mario Land 2, the 6 golden coins, or 6 golden, I think it's coins, not rings. Well, that game released, and my pops and I played that like crazy. He would have to go to work, and I was home with my mother, and I believe at the time my very young sister. My pops would go to work. He had the game file 1. His was always the first save file, and mine wasn't the second, third, fourth, whatever it may be. It was always the last game file, so that we wouldn't accidentally get anything mixed up. And that's why to this date, I always save my games when there are multiple files to save, not autosaves. I select the last game file. So my pops and I would play Super Mario Land 2. He would play a few levels during the evenings when he came home from work. That was his turn to play video games. And then when he was gone to work, I got to play the Game Boy, and I got to play my save file. I can't remember who beat the game first, or if we ever beat the game, but I do remember watching my dad and studying how to beat a level, seeing him play the game, being there sitting on his lap while he played, and then it was my turn to do the very, very same the next day. Well, fast forward much later, and there are other games I played. My very first Zelda game, Zelda Link's Awakening, many times in different formats, whether it was the original or the DX version, which incorporated the color, different types of color stuff that you got, or even later the remaster on the Nintendo Switch. I have played that game plenty of times, along with other titles, such as Advanced Wars, or Final Fantasy Tactics, or Golden Sun, even Golden Sun. Yes, Golden Sun. That game, I can't believe it got its attention, but I played many games on my Game Boy Advance and my Game Boy Advance SP, which happened to be my absolute favorite of all time Nintendo handheld device. Fast forward to 2023, February of 2023, when we got our very first Direct, and lo and behold, Nintendo drops the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance section of the Nintendo Switch Online and Expansion Pack service. And the crowd goes wild. And why was the Nintendo Direct so powerful? Because the first 3 quarters were seemingly pretty lame, and the ending was just Metroid Prime Remaster, which is its own video for its own day, and Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. Well, it's because the story that I just told is stories that we have all shared. We have all been playing Nintendo for a very, very long time. And I say it that way because back in the day, that's all it was. It was Nintendo, not Nintendo Switch or NES. It was just, let's go play Nintendo, because that's what we had growing up. And so when Nintendo as a company drops something like Game Boy games and Game Boy Advance games, not even Game Boy games, but recognizes games that you wouldn't think they would recognize. To see that Golden Sun, yes, that very game, or even the Fire Emblem on Game Boy Advance got recognition. Little bit less surprised Fire Emblem got it, but Golden Sun just goes to show you they are indeed in tune and plugged in to the very thing that keeps the heartbeat alive in the Nintendo world, and that is us, the fans. And I know that over the past couple of years, it has seemed that Nintendo hasn't been listening to us, and that they have just been kind of doing their own thing. And I'll say, you know what? Yeah, I felt that way. I've even released videos talking about that. But something very special happened after that direct. See, I was out of town. I was with my dad during that time. He has a Nintendo Switch. I have a Nintendo Switch. I got to stream in his office. If you haven't seen the stream, you can go ahead and watch the stream. I'll link it at the end. But at the very end, I realized the very game that I got to play for the first time on Game Boy is now available on the Nintendo Switch. And I was at my dad's house, so I ran over to my dad and said, hey dad, guess what? Nintendo Land 2 is now available to you on your Nintendo Switch with the Nintendo Switch Online. And he said, I don't even have a Nintendo Switch Online. I play Mario Kart by myself, I play some other games here and there, but I don't have a Nintendo Switch Online. Do I need to buy it? I said, no, I have a family plan. And so back in 93 or 94, whenever it was, when I actually played it, the game released in 92, my dad shared with me Super Mario Land 2, and I loved it. And this past week, I got to reshare Super Mario Land 2 with my father, and we both got to play it the same time on the same couch as father and son 30 years later. I can't even begin to tell you how amazing that felt. And that very feeling is how Nintendo is able to do what they do. They're able to re-release games because when the game originally released, it was so powerful and so special to so many people. And to some they think, oh, they're just cash grabbing. But to me, as a fan of Nintendo games, as someone who would be considered a fan man, I can honestly say that though new games are what we really want and what I really want as a gamer, I really enjoy and truly love that Nintendo is taking some of their back catalog and releasing it again to the public to play for a second, third, fourth, or 10th time with their own family members. Is pretty special. If that happened to you, or if you feel something, or you have a story to share, please share it in the comments below. I read all the comments, and I do respond to as many as possible. That being said, I'm gonna enjoy this delicious cup of coffee and say, happy gaming.